Welcome to the Prospective Doctor Podcast, where we will provide essential information for pre-medical students and those already in medical school. Listen each week for tips on how to improve your application and gain an acceptance to medical school.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm sure everybody is getting really close to submitting their AMCAS application, or they may have already submitted it by the time that you heard this podcast. This year, in 2018, it opened for submission on May 31st, so just a few days ago. Today, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about some of the more common mistakes that I see applicants make while submitting their primary application, and really how to avoid them. One of the most common mistakes that I see is people submitting too late. So if you've already submitted your application, you can absolutely ignore this tidbit of advice. But if you're still pending the submission of your primary application, I recommend trying to get it in as soon as possible. This is because most medical schools use rolling admissions, and that basically means that they review applications, offer secondary invites and interview invites, and ultimately acceptances on a rolling basis. That means that as they're reviewing applications and as they like people that they see applying to their medical school, they'll offer subsequent acceptances. If your application is late in the applicant pool, then that just means that you're at a disadvantage because the medical schools have already received and reviewed hundreds, probably thousands of applications before yours. Ideally, you want to get your application in within the first 2 weeks of June. If you're thinking about submitting in August, September, October is very late. Definitely want to talk to somebody that has expertise in medical school admissions to see if it's appropriate for you to submit this year, or possibly it may be best to wait the following year to apply. That being said, the second mistake that I commonly see is people rushing to submit their application because they get nervous about rolling admissions and trying to submit their application early. I definitely see a lot of applicants just rush through their application and then just click submit. And this can result in a lot of errors. And one I will touch about in the third most common mistake that I see, but it results in inadequate editing or description of your activities or your personal statement, perhaps not including letters of recommendation, which can be uploaded at a separate time, but you should try to have these uploaded when you submit your application, ideally. This can also result in a lot of errors in inputting your grades from your transcripts, and that forces AMCAS to correct the grades and everything that you inputted. If you have a lot of mistakes when you input your grades and your courses, then medical schools can perceive this as not taking the time to really thoroughly complete your application and accurately completing it as well. It can be seen as recklessness or carelessness. So don't rush to submit it. If you need 2 to 3 extra days so that you can be thorough, complete, and make as few mistakes as possible, then take those extra few days. It's definitely worth it, and it's not going to necessarily hurt your chances of admission. If you wait months to submit because you just can't finalize it, well, that can hurt your chances. But a few days is not going to make or break your chances for an acceptance. Stemming off of this, the third most common mistake that I see is punctuation errors. I can't tell you how many awesome applications I read over, and I see somebody that didn't capitalize the county that they grew up in, or didn't capitalize their first name, or forgot commas or periods or things like that in their application. And although that may seem like a very minor error, it can be very detrimental to an application. Again, medical schools can see this just as careless. And if you really think about it, if you're on a medical school admissions committee and you're sitting down with over 1,000, maybe 2,000, 3,000, some schools receive thousands upon thousands of applications to medical school. If you're sitting down with all those applications and you see somebody with a punctuation error or multiple errors in their application, then you're less likely to want to move forward with that individual application just because you have so many others on your plate. And so many of the other ones will not have these errors. So it's important, again, just to take your time when you go through the application. I usually recommend to applicants that I work with to have somebody, family member, a friend, a roommate, or somebody that they know that's close and will take the time to closely review their application. I recommend them having that individual just sit down with their application and ask them, can you please just look over everything in my application and proofread it? Please don't offer me advice, because at this time when you're proofing it, you've already had people look through your application, your activities, your personal statement, and you've gotten advice from different sources. So you don't want to keep editing as far as content goes for your activities and your personal statement and the other areas of your application. But really, what you want to do is have somebody else, another person, just really look at that application to make sure there's none of those punctuation, grammar, syntax, etc. type mistakes. And the reason why this is so helpful is because after you have read over your application so many times as an applicant, it can be very easy to miss those mistakes and just overlook them. So having somebody else take a look at it and provide that objective eye can be very helpful. The fourth mistake I see very commonly with the primary application is just an inadequate school list. So this can be applying to too few schools, applying to too many schools, or just applying to schools that you're not necessarily in their competitive range. How to choose a school list is a whole nother topic of discussion, but generally I usually recommend people apply to somewhere between 35 to 45 schools in their primary application. Any fewer than this can result in difficulty in achieving admission just because you didn't cast a wide enough net, so to speak. And if you apply to more than these schools, well, it can just be really difficult for you to complete all of the secondary applications to these schools, especially completing them within a couple of weeks after receiving them. So you're hurting your chances later on because you're just not able to complete the remainder of the application at these various schools. Along with that is people just applying to schools because they know the name or they want to be in that area. But picking a school list really requires some meticulousness and thought to the whole process. You should really sit down with the MSAR, an advisor, school data, and figure out where you lie in your competitiveness based on the school's average GPA and MCAT, and then also really account for demographical factors. For instance, if you're not a California resident, it may not be worth for you to apply to some of the UC schools in California. And that's because they only accept maybe 10 to 20% out-of-state students. So if you're not from California, or if you're trying to apply to a state school that is very selective for their in-state residents, then it may not be worth an application there. So putting together a school list that is reflective of your application and your competitiveness, and also really accounting for demographical factors, is super important and can ultimately be the deciding factor on whether or not you receive an acceptance. Finally, the fifth mistake that I see commonly are people listing too many or too few activities in their work experiences section. What I mean by this is some people list too many. Let's say you have 15 entries allotted on your AMCAS application, and I see people have the need to fill up all 15 slots. And this can be detrimental because maybe they're just putting an experience they participated in for 1 to 2 hours, or maybe didn't even have much of an involvement at all in an experience slot, just trying to fill it. And admissions committees can see that if you're just putting something in there just to put it, they can read in between the lines and see that this was not a very significant experience, and even can tell by the hours and your description that this was something that you had very little involvement in and does not impact you as an applicant much at all. So instead of the quantity of your experiences, you should really focus on the quality of experiences. I've also seen the flip side as well, where people put too few activities. I've seen some people that maybe have 5, 6 activities total. And again, with allowing 15 entries, you should try to maximize those as much as possible. Stressing quality again, but make sure that you have somewhere between at least 10 to 12 activities so it shows that you have been involved in a lot of different things and that you're a well-rounded applicant. For example, some people I've seen try to squeeze in research and a poster presentation in one entry, and then they turn out only having several entries. You can space that out by having research as one entry, and that's its own category, and another entry which is presentations, and that by itself is a category again. So take some time to think through your activities, write them out, make a list of activities that you have done during your college experiences, and make sure that you're only putting ones in there that are significant and meaningful to you. Focus on the quality of the activity rather than just trying to fill all 15 slots. And if you don't have enough, if you only have a few, take some extra time to brainstorm and try to maximize your experiences by spreading them out and elaborating on what you did in that specific activity. So these are the few mistakes that I see very commonly in the primary application. Submitting too late, rushing to submit your application to try to get it in early, punctuation, grammar, spelling errors, having an inadequate school list, and not really maximizing the activities experiences section of the application. Try as much as you can to avoid these mistakes because any of these can affect your chances of admission. And if you have any questions or you're getting close to submitting your primary application, and if you're just not sure it's ready to submit, then hit us up at medschoolcoach.com where we can have one of our experienced advisors review your information and make sure that you're putting together an exceptional medical school application. Good luck, everyone.
Our mission is to inspire, encourage, and inform students as you journey through a rigorous and intricate process of achieving your dreams in medicine. Visit us at prospectivedoctor.com for more essential resources in your medical school journey.